Today, we're diving into Good to Great by Jim Collins. More than just a business book, it's a journey through 10 transformative insights that challenge everything we think we know about success, leadership, and greatness. Each step reveals a twist, leading to a finale that will leave you questioning your own path to greatness. The legendary blueprint. The video opens with an air of reverence, framing Good to Great as a modern-day oracle for business visionaries. With its striking orange and black cover, the book itself is presented as a symbol of transformation, a bridge between mediocrity and excellence. The narrator sets the stage by describing the world of business as a battlefield, where countless companies compete, but only a select few achieve lasting greatness. It is here that Good to Great steps in, promising a revolutionary framework to not just survive but thrive. Drawing viewers in, the video highlights the book's bold claim: great companies aren't born, they're built, brick by brick, through disciplined choices and unwavering focus. The tone is almost hypnotic as we hear snippets of inspiring stories: a floundering corporation turned market leader, a family-run business growing into a global empire. Each anecdote feels like a golden thread in a tapestry of triumph. The narrator pauses, inviting viewers to imagine the possibilities. What if the tools for greatness were within reach? What if mediocrity could be redefined as the first step on an extraordinary journey? The scene crescendos with a challenge: what separates good from great, and are you ready to find out? With these questions lingering, the video sets the stage for a deep dive into the principles that have enthralled CEOs, entrepreneurs, and dreamers alike. The promise of the ultimate blueprint feels tantalizingly close, just waiting to be uncovered. The Golden Principles. The journey into Good to Great begins with the unveiling of its 3 foundational concepts, pillars of wisdom that have been credited with transforming struggling businesses into industry giants. The first is Level 5 leadership, a paradoxical blend of humility and fierce resolve. The narrator paints a vivid picture of these leaders, describing them not as charismatic icons but as quiet, determined forces who channel their ego away from personal glory and toward the success of their organization. Stories of their seemingly understated yet transformative leadership style create an almost mythical aura around these individuals. Next, we encounter the Hedgehog Concept, inspired by the ancient fable of the hedgehog and the fox. It's not about doing everything, but about mastering the one thing that aligns passion, talent, and economic value. The narrator uses analogies and examples, showing companies that have found their hedgehog and thrived by sticking to it with relentless focus. This principle feels both profound and accessible, sparking the imagination of viewers who start wondering, what's my hedgehog? Finally, the flywheel effect is introduced, a metaphor for the unstoppable momentum that builds when consistent, disciplined actions align with a well-defined vision. The narrator brings this concept to life with an example of a company whose early struggles turned into a cascading success. Once the flywheel started turning, there was no stopping it. Each principle is presented with a sense of wonder, as if revealing a universal truth hidden in plain sight. The narrator hints at the almost magical synergy between these concepts, suggesting that when applied together, they unlock a company's potential to transcend mediocrity. The video ends the segment by posing a tantalizing question: with these principles in your hands, what's stopping you from going from good to great? The audience is left inspired, eager to see how these ideas can be applied and wondering if they truly are as transformative as they seem. The hidden ingredient. As the video transitions from the elegance of the principles, a subtle shift occurs. The narrator, now leaning in with a tone of intrigue, drops a provocative statement: principles alone don't create greatness, it's the people who bring them to life. This segment delves into the human element that makes or breaks the path to greatness. The narrator recounts vivid examples of organizations that embraced the tenets of good to great but faltered due to one overlooked truth: No principle works in isolation from execution. We hear about a company that identified its hedgehog concept yet struggled because its leadership team couldn't align on priorities. Another story recounts an organization with the perfect strategy, undone by a toxic workplace culture that stalled the flywheel before it could gain momentum. The video introduces the idea of discipline as the linchpin of success, not just in action but in thought and character. It's here that level 5, leadership, takes center stage again, reframed as the driving force behind the execution of these ideas. The leaders, depicted as the unsung heroes, must harness not only their own resolve but also inspire it in their teams. Viewers are asked to consider, do you have the right people in place, the ones with the courage to confront brutal facts and the humility to drive progress without seeking personal credit? The narrator also emphasizes the role of consistency, likening greatness to an intricate dance where every step must be executed with care and precision. Success, they assert, isn't about one grand gesture, it's about 1,000 small, disciplined actions repeated over time. As the segment closes, the audience feels the weight of responsibility. The promise of greatness, once so tantalizing, now seems more complex. The narrator poses a reflective question: if greatness depends on the people, the discipline, and the execution, how ready are you to embrace the challenge? The cracks begin to show. The video takes a dramatic turn as the narrator, with a tone both curious and skeptical, begins to unravel the story behind some of Good to Great's most celebrated companies. Initially held up as paragons of transformation, these organizations are revisited with the sharp lens of hindsight, and the results are startling. We hear the tale of Circuit City, once lauded for its disciplined culture and strategic focus. In the book, it was a shining example of the flywheel effect in action. But today it's a cautionary tale of obsolescence, its doors shuttered and its legacy confined to history. The narrator continues with other examples, each more unsettling than the last, companies that soared on the principles outlined in the book only to falter under the weight of changing markets, leadership missteps, or an inability to adapt. Suddenly, the framework that seemed so invincible starts to feel vulnerable, like a fortress built on shifting sands. Viewers are prompted to question the idea of sustainable greatness. Is it truly attainable, or is it more fragile than the book suggests? Could some of these companies have achieved their success through unique circumstances, economic trends, market conditions, or sheer luck that couldn't be replicated over time? The tone becomes reflective as the narrator introduces the concept of circumstantial greatness, the idea that some successes may not stem solely from strategy but from being in the right place at the right time. What if greatness, the narrator asks, is less about a formula and more about timing, adaptability, and resilience? The audience is left on edge, grappling with the possibility that the book's celebrated stories might be less universal than they initially appeared. The cracks are no longer subtle, they're fractures in the foundation of an idea they were just beginning to trust. As the segment concludes, the narrator leaves viewers with a chilling question: if greatness can falter, how much of it was ever real? The shadow of bias. The video takes on a more investigative tone, diving beneath the surface of Good to Great to scrutinize the methodology behind its celebrated conclusions. With the audience now questioning the sustainability of greatness, the narrator introduces another layer of intrigue. What if the research itself was flawed? The narrator recounts the rigorous process described by Jim Collins' teams of researchers poring over data, identifying patterns, and distilling them into principles. On the surface, it feels thorough, even scientific. But as the lens sharpens, cracks appear in the research's foundation. The term survivorship bias takes center stage. The narrator explains how focusing solely on companies that succeeded might obscure the broader picture. For every Circuit City celebrated in the book, they reveal how many other companies applied the same principles and failed. Another shadow looms in the form of cherry-picked data. The narrator speculates whether the book's examples were chosen because they fit a compelling narrative rather than representing universal truths. A particularly striking critique is highlighted: did the research uncover greatness, or did it retrofit greatness to the companies that succeeded? The video shifts to an example of a company featured in the book that rose to prominence but later collapsed. The narrator posits that this downfall wasn't mentioned not because it didn't fit the principles, but because it hadn't happened yet. If greatness can only be judged in hindsight, they ask, how can it be prescribed as a blueprint for the future? Viewers are drawn into the tension between ambition and authenticity. On one hand, Good to Great offers invaluable insights. On the other, its claims now seem tinged with the same imperfections it seeks to illuminate. The segment closes with a provocative question: if even the most celebrated blueprint is shaped by bias, how do we truly define greatness? The audience is left grappling with the unsettling realization that every narrative, even one of greatness, comes with its blind spots. The doom loop effect. The video shifts into darker territory, introducing the concept of the doom loop, a cautionary counterpoint to the flywheel effect. The narrator, with an air of forewarning, explains that when companies lose focus or fail to maintain disciplined action, they don't just stagnate, they spiral downward, caught in a cycle of reactive decisions and missed opportunities. The narrator revisits companies featured in Good to Great, examining how some eventually fell into this very trap. The flywheel, once a symbol of momentum and progress, becomes a cautionary tale of inertia lost. A particularly vivid example is presented: a company that abandoned its hedgehog concept in pursuit of flashy acquisitions and short-term gains. The result: a swift descent into irrelevance. The tension builds as the narrator describes how the doom loop feeds on itself. Each hasty, poorly aligned decision compounds the chaos, pulling the organization further away from its core values and long-term vision. In the end, the narrator says, it's not a single bad decision that leads to failure, it's a series of small, undisciplined choices that accumulate over time. Ironically, some of the companies celebrated in Good to Great seem to have succumbed to this very fate. The narrator highlights one such organization, its decline, a haunting echo of the principles it once embodied. The audience feels a sense of poetic tragedy: the very insights meant to prevent failure instead serve as a lens to understand it. This segment also introduces a deeper philosophical question: can greatness ever be permanent, or is it inherently transient? The narrator suggests that greatness requires constant vigilance and adaptability, qualities that even the best companies struggle to sustain in the face of change. The video closes this chapter with a somber observation: the flywheel and the doom loop are two sides of the same coin. One leads to greatness, the other, to decline. The difference lies in discipline, focus, and the courage to stay true to your values no matter how tempting the shortcuts may seem. The expiration date on greatness. The narrative takes a forward-looking turn, raising a provocative question: is greatness timeless, or does it have an expiration date? With a world rapidly evolving through technological advancements, shifting markets, and changing consumer behaviors, the principles outlined in Good to Great face a critical test. The narrator explores the book's key concepts, reflecting on their relevance in a world far removed from the era of their inception. The Hedgehog Concept, with its focus on a singular, defining idea, once seemed unshakable. But what happens when industries are disrupted overnight, and the hedgehog is left vulnerable in a forest it no longer recognizes? Through vivid examples, the narrator illustrates how some companies lauded in the book struggled to adapt to change. One organization's commitment to its core idea, once a source of strength, became a liability in an age demanding flexibility and innovation. What worked yesterday, the narrator muses, can become a stumbling block tomorrow. The concept of the flywheel is revisited, this time through the lens of speed. While the metaphor of steady, cumulative progress resonates, the narrator questions whether it can withstand the breakneck pace of modern markets. In a world where the rules change faster than the flywheel can turn, they ask, is slow and steady still enough to win the race? The audience is drawn deeper into the tension between timeless principles and the realities of an ever-changing landscape. The narrator introduces the idea of contextual greatness, suggesting that the path to success may not be universal but instead tailored to the unique challenges and opportunities of each era. As the segment concludes, the narrator leaves viewers with an unsettling thought: if greatness is defined by adaptability, then even the most timeless principles may need to evolve or risk becoming obsolete. The screen fades with a chilling question: are we clinging to a blueprint for a world that no longer exists? A tale of two perspectives. The narrative takes a reflective turn, offering a shift in perspective that redefines the very essence of good to great. As viewers grapple with the critiques and challenges presented thus far, the narrator introduces a provocative idea: what if the book's true value isn't in its answers but in the questions it inspires? The narrator paints a vivid contrast between two ways of approaching the book. The first perspective treats good to great as a step-by-step manual, a rigid blueprint for achieving success. Companies and leaders following this path aim to replicate its principles exactly, hoping to achieve the same outcomes as those celebrated in its pages. The second perspective, however, views the book as a philosophical lens, a tool to question and redefine what greatness means. Instead of rigid adherence, this approach encourages introspection, adaptation, and the courage to challenge conventions. It's not about being great by someone else's definition, the narrator suggests, but about discovering what greatness means for you. The tension between these perspectives is explored through real-world examples. A startup in a fast-changing industry, unable to mirror the stability of the companies in good to great, uses the book not as a rulebook but as a source of inspiration. In contrast, a legacy company clinging to outdated principles finds itself unable to evolve, trapped by its own interpretation of greatness. The segment takes on a philosophical tone, delving into the heart of leadership and ambition. Perhaps, the narrator posits, greatness isn't about reaching a destination but about the journey, the willingness to question, to adapt, and to grow. As the chapter draws to a close, viewers are presented with a challenge: which perspective resonates with you? Are you chasing someone else's definition of greatness, or are you bold enough to define your own? The screen fades with a tantalizing hint of what's to come, setting the stage for the ultimate twist. The ultimate twist. The narrative reaches a crescendo with a revelation that turns everything on its head. Greatness isn't a fixed destination, it's a constantly evolving journey. The narrator, with an air of dramatic finality, challenges the audience to rethink what they've believed all along. The segment opens with a rhetorical question: what if greatness isn't something you achieve but something you pursue? This idea shatters the illusion of permanence painted in earlier discussions. Drawing on the failures and successes of the companies highlighted in Good to Great, the narrator weaves a tapestry of insight. Each company's rise and fall wasn't just about strategies but about the ability or inability to continuously adapt, question, and redefine themselves. The audience is taken on an emotional roller coaster, revisiting the book's celebrated concepts like the Flywheel Effect and the Hedgehog Concept. These principles, once heralded as the keys to success, are now revealed to be tools useful but incomplete without the willingness to evolve. The flywheel may turn endlessly, the narrator intones, but only if you're willing to keep refining its axis. A particularly shocking example drives the point home. One of the most lauded companies in the book achieved immense success, only to crumble years later under the weight of its own complacency. Greatness wasn't their undoing, the narrator explains. the belief that they had already achieved it was. The narrator brings the twist full circle by reflecting on the book's deeper purpose. Perhaps, they suggest, good to great isn't about offering a definitive roadmap but about holding up a mirror to its readers. It's a call to action, a challenge to question their values, priorities, and definitions of success. As the segment concludes, the narrator leaves viewers with a haunting yet empowering realization: true greatness lies not in what you've accomplished but in your willingness to keep striving, keep questioning, and keep growing. The screen fades with an electrifying message: the journey to greatness isn't about answers, it's about the courage to ask the right questions. The final challenge. The video reaches its poignant conclusion, transforming from an analysis of good to great into a deeply personal call to action. The narrator turns directly to the audience, their tone earnest yet challenging. What does greatness mean to you? The segment opens with a reflection on the journey so far. The audience has seen the rise and fall of celebrated companies, questioned the timelessness of principles, and grappled with the notion that greatness is not a destination but a perpetual pursuit. Now, the focus shifts from abstract concepts to the viewer's own life and ambitions. Every business, the narrator says, starts with a dream, a vision of something better. But what about you? What dream are you chasing, and whose definition of success are you following? The question hangs in the air, inviting introspection. The narrator recounts a moving story of an entrepreneur who abandoned traditional markers of success to pursue a passion project. Their journey, fraught with risks and setbacks, embodies the idea of defining greatness on one's own terms. Their story, the narrator muses, reminds us that greatness isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's quiet, personal, and uniquely yours. The video builds toward its climax with a challenge: stop chasing someone else's blueprint. Instead, create your own. The narrator encourages viewers to apply the lessons of good to great not as rigid rules but as inspiration to forge their paths. Let the flywheel turn, they advise, but don't forget who's pushing it. You decide where it leads. As the screen fades, the final words linger: greatness isn't what you achieve, it's who you become. So ask yourself, are you ready to begin your journey to your own version of great? The video closes with an evocative image of a blank notebook, its pages waiting to be filled. The narrator's voiceover whispers, "Your story begins now."